I am Cassie Thompson. I'm super excited to be here with the beautiful Noelle. I am a 500-hour RYT yoga teacher. I also am a yoga hour instructor, a booty instructor, and sometimes I teach sculpt and shred as well. I have been teaching yoga for jeepers, it's been like 6 years now, I think, and practicing for probably about 11. And it's just like a huge part of my life. And I've met some of the best people, including Noelle, through that journey and through the practice. And so I'm super excited just to be here and chat today a little bit more about it. I currently live in East Grand Forks, Minnesota, with my fiance and my two dogs. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me. So
Oh, I'm so excited for this. So this is the More You Know podcast. I get to interview Cassie today, and I'm so excited. We're going to talk about yoga and just dive into all the different things. So I want to start off just like asking you, like, what brought you to your yoga practice? Like, how are you introduced to yoga?
totally. So I grew up in a super small town of Grafton, North Dakota, and Patty Gorder, she had a yoga and massage studio there. And I originally had started going to Zumba classes, and I am like not a good Zumba dancer at all. But I was a sophomore in high school, and it was just like a summer Zumba, like they called it teen Zumba, and it was so fun. And me and all my girlfriends would go. We just got to like move our body and get all the energy out. And after that, I was like a huge basketball player in high school, and I played some college basketball. And so I was talking to Patty, and she's like, "You should come to yoga. It'd be great for like stretching, injury prevention, soreness, all that good stuff." And so I finally just was like, I'm going to take a class one summer. And so it was later that summer, probably fall, before my junior year of high school. I took a class and I was hooked. And I would like book it out of basketball practice. I'm not kidding. Or like ask my coach. I'd be like, can we like be done at 5:30 so I can make it to yoga at 6? And I just wanted to be there all the time. I was probably there like 3 or 4 nights a week on top of all my other social activities. And then she had Saturday morning classes as well. And so I just really grew to love the practice and how it made my body feel. And at that point, I was lifting a lot of weights and doing all the things that come along with high school sports and college sports. And so it just made me and my body feel really good for the first couple months. And then I started to notice I was like a super anxious high schooler, like the most anxious high schooler. Like I did not know how my mom put up with me. And I started to notice like a shift in that. And so I was like, I kind of like forgot about the way it made my body feel. And I was like, this just makes me feel good. Like it makes my mind feel good. It makes everything, like all the subtle bodies that I am. That's what I truly started to love about it. And so I started diving deeper into like the lifestyle of yoga, and all like the philosophy that comes behind it and the meditation side, and why that was like so life-changing and making me feel good, not even when I was on my mat, but also just like when I left. I just noticed it like through school and personal and relationships in high school. Like that was a really tough thing for me in high school. And so I totally noticed like a whole shift in that as well. So I just like I started out as just like injury prevention and getting a little bit of a stretch in here and there, and it turned into so much more. And here I am today. So
Yeah, and I love that because a lot of people are drawn to yoga for like the physical aspect, and then I love if you just stay long enough, like it ends up just cracking you wide open, and it just becomes so much more than that. And I think that that's what we really are after. Like we know that like the physical is feeling good, but like what we really need is that like deeper like change that's happening internally. And I think it's just like getting to know yourself. Like you get to know your body in a different way, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm getting to know my mind in a different way and how I interact with the world in a different way. And like you said, it just manifests into everything that you show up for in your life. So it's so cool.
I think the first time I realized that it was like making a difference, I was like going through some really tough stuff in a relationship. And obviously all high school relationships are kind of like that. And I remember going to class and just like breaking down and sobbing in the middle of class, like on my mat. And I was just like, this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so it was just so crazy, just like the whole breaking open process of like, for so long, you're just like, oh, I feel good. And then finally you're like, you go through the murky and muddiness of it too, right? Like, it's not like a fun process. And obviously, I always tell people like I ebb and flow in that. Like, one of my teachers, Christina, and she's like, bliss is not for me. Like, I am not in this practice for bliss. And she's like, a lot of times I am like in the murkiest and muddiest of waters, like trying to figure out like me and my feelings and myself. And that's how I feel a lot of times in the practice, but you come out on the other side of that. And then sometimes you go back into that, right? And that's kind of how I feel lately too with COVID, is like right now, like I'm in the murkiness of it. Like I'm practicing, and I'm trying to sit with things, and then I'll come out on the other side of it. So
Yeah, yeah. And it's just, there's something about yoga that just breaks you wide open, where you have to be honest with yourself. Like you can't hide. Like it's like you step onto your mat and all of a sudden everything that you've been trying to run away from and kind of just push down, it's like, oh, like we're gonna deal with this right now. And it's different because it's not necessarily like, yes, sometimes you know, journal, or you do think you take things a little bit deeper, like in the lifestyle of yoga, but sometimes all you need is to just have a really good deep practice, and your body kind of knows what to do. Your mind kind of works itself out. It's like just giving yourself permission to be on your mat and be fully there is more than enough than you need in times to get out of that murkiness or to go through it, and to just kind of like hold your hand, like you're holding your own hand and saying like, okay, we can get through this. I feel like that's what yoga is for me, and it seems like that's shown up for you too. What would you say to like a beginner that like, so say they've heard of yoga and there's just these ideas of yoga out there? I remember thinking like yoga was something that like I could never do, like because it seems like this grandiose thing that only spiritual enlightened beings do.
exactly
So what would
right.
you say to a beginner? Yeah, like we're not enlightened.
I would say just show up. I mean, that's like however showing up is for you. Um, and try different classes. Like I tried a lot of different types of yoga, and I love a lot of different types of yoga. And I found something that I really, really love. But you just have to show up and try different things and see what works for you and your body. One of the things that my teacher has always told me is shape shift to state shift. And I really resonate with that. It's like shifting your shapes to shift your state of being. And so find something that can do that for you. And just whether it's 15 minutes, whether it's an hour, whether it's 2 hours, just show up and practice. Or like if you're not comfortable going to a class yet, go online. Like especially right now with all the COVID, there's so many options for online classes. Whether you want to pay like $6, and a lot of them are free too. And I know you have a free one up too. So just like show up to that, give it a try. And for me too, like sometimes my practice isn't always like glamorous, and it's not always like the things that I post on Instagram, obviously. Sometimes it's just like I have a blanket and my mat and a bolster, and it's restorative. And I'm just laying in poses for like 15 minutes, and that's what my body needs. So show up and listen to yourself and just try. That's the biggest thing. I was having a discussion yesterday actually with my little sister Anna, and she's a 200-hour teacher as well. And we were talking about hot yoga, and she struggles in the heat, and I struggle in the heat a little bit too. Like too much of it for me is not good. And so I veered away from that a little bit. And she was saying how she really likes the heat, but her first class she ever took in the heat, which was probably like 5 years ago, she was saying how she could not like stay in the room. She was like, I had to leave. She's like, I made it like 25 minutes and I had to get out. And she's like, and then I felt like a failure, and I just like, I didn't want to come back, and I was embarrassed. And I was like, why? Like you showed up, you did what you could did, like you calibrated to your capacity, and then your body was like, that's enough for today. And then maybe next time you'll make it 27 minutes instead of 25. And so just showing up for yourself, however that is for you, is huge, because showing up is different for every single one of us. And even for me, showing up is different for me every day. And we all have super busy lives, and we're not like these enlightened beings that are just like meditating and doing yoga all day. Like we're running from one thing to the next constantly. At least I know I am. And so whether it's like between when dinner's cooking and you're like, I have 10 minutes and I'm just gonna sit and be with myself. Or I have 10 minutes and I'm going to do some handstands. Whatever that is for you, just do it and just show up. So that would be my biggest thing.
I
Yeah.
love that. And it's just kind of like the idea of letting go of the expectation that you put on yourself that it's supposed to look a certain way. And there's so many different types of yoga that, yes, like find a type of yoga that you like and don't stop until you do, because there's one out there for you. And like you said, maybe one day you're like, I need the hot yoga. Then one day you're like, I need to just chill out and lay on my mat. But I felt like when I let go of the expectation, I all of a sudden could show up to it more. When I had the expectation, like, okay, the only thing that's going to satisfy me is an hour-long practice, then all of a sudden my life didn't allow for that to happen, because some days I do only have 10 minutes, or I'm on a walk and then I'm like, okay, I could do 10 minutes of mindfulness right now. Or I'm making dinner, like you said, and I can just do a forward fold and it's life changing. Yet if I just hung on to that expectation that, oh, well, this isn't yoga, or this isn't serving me, just because it's not what it looks like out there in the social media and the culture and stuff, it's still serving you, right? Like if it makes you feel better on the other side, like that's yoga. Just paying attention to your breath is yoga. So I love that, like just letting all of the expectations go, because then your practice will tell you what you need, or your body will tell you what you need. Like, okay, and just honoring that, I feel like, is better than, sticking through that hot yoga class when your body's telling you to stop. That's not yoga. That's not yoga.
It's just like I really love my teachers, as you can tell, but I use a lot of their quotes all the time. One of my teachers, she always says at some point she stopped using the practice to work on herself and she started using the practice to work with herself. And that was like a game changer. And that was actually in one of her podcasts that she said that. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that's what I need to do. Like, I'm not using the practice to like, obviously you get all the benefits of the practice that comes along with it, but like I want to work with myself. Like I don't want to, it's not me working on myself. I want to be like, what does my body need? What do I need to show up for today? Like, what am I feeling in my mind? What part of my body is maybe aching or feeling tension? And sometimes it's just like I'm like, I'm craving restorative, or I'm craving a handstand or a headstand or an arm balance. Or sometimes I'm like, I just want to lay in Shavasana for an hour, and not that that ever really happens, but still, it's like using the practice to work with yourself and what you have that day in your capacity is huge, because the more, like you said, the more you like force it and you're like, I have to show up for an hour, the more that your time and like your day doesn't allow for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy just to think of that, but just to be like, I got a forward fold while I was doing dinner or while I was unloading the dishwasher. Life changing. I feel better. Huge. Like that's a win in my book.
Mm-hmm. And looking at it more like medicine, like yoga is like a natural medicine if you allow it to be. But like with anything in life, if we do put those pressures on it and those expectations, it can become something that isn't serving us. Like you can go, like there's other people that are like addicted to hot yoga and they go every single day and it's harming them more than it is healing them. And so just kind of, I always ask myself the question, like, why am I showing up today? What do I need from this? Not like that expectation. Am I doing this because someone else is expecting this of me, or even I'm expecting this of me? Or am I doing this to feel better on the other side as a form of medicine and self-care? Because that's why I was drawn to the yoga practice in the first place, right? So, you are a badass business owner and you're just like a badass in general. Like, I feel like everything that you show up to, you just go like all in, like go hard. And so I had the privilege of working with Cassie at her yoga studio that she had open. And I just want to talk and dive into that. Like, I don't know if you have any perspective for someone that wants to open a yoga studio, maybe what you learned from opening a yoga studio, just kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, we were open for 3 years. So it was a really exciting time in my life. I mean, I opened the studio when I was 22. I'm now 25, and unfortunately, we just closed our doors because of the circumstances in the world. But I would say, I mean, you just kind of have to take the leap too. And obviously, everything is like a very educated risk. I went to business school. So for me, I'm like always strategizing everything for that. But there is a big difference. One of the main things I've learned, and I talked a lot about with my teachers, was there is a huge difference in being a yoga teacher and then being a yoga studio owner. And I really had to spend some time right away. I like wasn't teaching as much, and I was doing all of these things that I was like, and I mean, I love it, but it was different because it was like you're not just like showing up and teaching. Your energy is pulled in 100 different directions. And so you have to really make sure you can like see the difference in that. And that it's not just all about teaching. There's a lot of things that come along with it. But I got to work with you and some of the most amazing instructors, and Danielle and Katie, who own the studio too. And so it's work, but it's fun. And I always said, like, I didn't open the studio to like make money and become this like thing, right? Like, I opened the studio to serve the community. And really, at the end of the day, that is what we were all there for, was to have somewhere to serve the East Grand Forks and Grand Forks community, and a place of refuge, and a place where you can come in, and not feel judged, and a little sanctuary. And even if you came, like I said, if you came and you did an hour of class, or if you came to expanding and you were there for 90 minutes, or if you're like, I only came to restorative, like that was it. Like, we wanted to offer a variety of classes so that everyone felt like they had a place where they could come practice. And whether the practice for them was physical, whether it was mental, or whether if it was starting to become both, because that does happen. Like we talked about, you see a lot of people come in and they're like, I'm going to do hot yoga because I think I can lose a few pounds. And I'm like, I think you're going to get a lot more from that than you think you are, from that class. And so it was such a ride in all sorts of ways. I mean, I miss it. And it's been a good break, with this, to kind of like dive into my own practice a lot. I've been working through some stuff on my own, so that's been nice. But I say go for it. And whether it's like you're opening a studio, because ours was huge, we had a hot studio and a non-hot space, or you're just like teaching classes in your living room or on a Zoom call, or you're just teaching some outdoor classes, or you have a little space, whatever it is for you, just teach. That's kind of my thing. If you want to teach, is just teach and kind of slowly learn all the aspects of that. And with owning the business, just know that it is a lot more than just teaching. And that comes with everything too, but it was a big learning curve, for me as well, I think for all of us. But at the end of the day, I was always like, every single night when I went to bed, I knew I was so blessed because I had some of the best teachers, at the studio. And I never, like, with all of you guys there, it was just, I was so thankful because it didn't feel like a job to me. I was really adamant, even when I was talking to Matt, like, I'd always say I'm going to teach, but I never called it work, and I never called it a job, because that's not what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be, a place for me and a refuge for me, just as much as it was for my students.
Oh my gosh. And it was. The energy in that studio was just next level. And every time I went there, it was like, I don't even need to do my yoga practice. I just need to sit in this studio and just be here because I feel so good. But I love that you are really honest about the fact that obviously it is a business. So if you're opening up a yoga studio, you are entering into this being more of your job and having more responsibilities in that aspect. I felt this for sure when I started teaching. When I went from being a student to a teacher, I all of a sudden didn't practice anymore. And I'm like, oh no, like that's why I'm doing this, because it served me so deeply. And it's really not a service to me, or my students, if I can't keep up my own practice. So I think just setting those boundaries and getting really clear with yourself, like, okay, I'm going to give this much to the business part, this much has to stay with me and my own personal practice, so I can show up to that business part with all of myself. But yeah, and I also love that you touch on all the different ways that you can teach. Like, don't limit yourself. Like, don't wait for some teacher to come around and be like, you should teach at my studio, or like someone to hire you. Like, you can totally go out there and create it yourself nowadays. So that's amazing. What is your like favorite part of, or like, what's your favorite version of yoga right now? Like, I know that you've done so many different kinds of yoga. Like, what would be your favorite part? And then maybe like describe a few of them for people that don't know.
So when I started practicing, with Patty, and she is like my lifelong teacher to this day. I'll have to tell her to listen to this because I just love her so much, and she's
Love
like,
you, Patty.
but when I started practicing with Patty, she was an Anusara teacher. After Anusara, they kind of like her and her teachers kind of left that lineage a little bit, and now I practice mostly hatha yoga and the yoga hour style. And then a lot of expanding through hatha. So I use like a ton of props, like almost a lot of the things you'll see me do other than just like a yoga hour. If I'm like really diving into like an hour, 2 hour practice, I do like a ton of prop work. So like chairs, straps, blankets, blocks, bolsters. Like I've really grown to love that practice because it's just so exciting and fun, and the props can get you into things that, like, I have a very athletic build, and so the props can really help me open up and get into things that I wouldn't be able to do without them. So right now that's kind of where my heart is, and I love the yoga hour just as like a class too because it's an hour long. It's doable yet difficult. It's from anywhere to a beginner to like an expert level class. And one of my other teachers, her thing was for a while was she was making easy poses hard, and I loved that because I felt for like a chunk of time in my life when I really was into vinyasa, and I still do love a good vinyasa class to move through it. Um, but I felt like sometimes when I would just like be in my warrior two, there was like no muscle engagement, or
Mhm.
I'd be like doing something just for the mere fact to do it. And
Mhm.
so now that I've kind of taken a step back, a lot of those, like my when I do my personal practice or teach yoga hour class, it's very alignment based, and it's like engage this muscle, tone your abdomen, draw your kneecap up into your thigh, squeeze your shoulder blades together. Like there's a lot of that, and I feel like my postures are a little bit stronger in general to make me a little bit stronger. And so I really, that's where my heart lies. And at this moment, I never see that changing, but you never know. Because for a really long time too, after I was done playing college basketball, I was like so into sculpt and shred or tone or whatever it's called in the area you're in, whoever you are listening. But with the weights, so it was like a faster paced class, and I had a shoulder injury, not from that but from prior, and so after a while that really took a toll on my body, and so did the heat. I was just overdoing it, and but I did love that class because I love the intensity of it coming from like a college athlete who was like, I was so used to like running and lifting weights, like I needed the intensity and someone to be like, come on, like not yelling, but you know what I just yelled that in Cora, just like, what, mom? But but I needed that intensity. And then the older I've gotten, I don't need that anymore. Like I found different ways to like get into that a little bit. And just the older I've gotten, my body can't handle it either. I mean, I'm 25, but still, like I had shoulder surgery, and it just still, I can't do it. I really do love booty yoga as well. So booty yoga is like tribal dancey yoga. However, I mean, every teacher teaches it so different. Like you're spiraling, you're doing a lot of like jumps, you're doing a lot of like really unorthodox movements in a very safe way. And that's a really good way to get your energy moving as well. I feel like that practice, like I always have some sort of emotional release in that practice. And not that I don't in other practices, but usually it's like a very emotional release during practice or after, because you're moving and it's just so much is getting out of you. And so I really dabble in a lot of different practices. Restorative, I would say yoga hour and like an expanding yoga hour and a restorative are kind of the things, the three that I'm like leaning to right now for my personal practice. And so I did a yoga hour this morning, and then restorative yoga, I was teaching that at the studio before all this craziness happened, and I love it. Like just having that time, like meditation is really hard for me. That's why I say like I'm not a meditator. Like I will like do it when I'm doing dishes. Like for me, I kind of, or like on a walk, I have to like do like a movement meditation almost is easier for me because sitting is hard sometimes. And so, and just being with myself is hard a lot of the time, as it is, I think, for a lot of people. But I really like restorative because you're in a posture that your body is like letting all your subtle bodies go, but you still have that meditative side of where like the teacher's not talking constantly. You're moving every like 5 to 15 minutes. And so I really, really have grown to love that practice because I feel like it makes my body feel really good when I'm sore, and my mind just like, it's a huge release for me. So I dabble in a lot of different things. But I love it. I mean, I love to learn too. And I would never like, I love to take other people's classes and do other types of things. I've been doing a ton of like online classes through different studios that I found or people are sharing, just to go through different teachers and do different types of practices is really big too, because I don't think one type of practice is always like healthy in the long term either. So like just doing different things and different ways to get your energy and your body moving is huge. And so um, primarily most days I'm doing yoga hour or like an expanding class, but you'll find me kind of everywhere. So
Yeah, and I love that because that is like saying, okay, do whatever is going to get you to show up, right? Like if you have like this idea in your head, like I can only do vinyasa, then the days that your body isn't feeling that, you're not going to show up. Whereas if you have the freedom to be like, okay, I try everything. That would be my advice, is like try all of, like you just said, just get yourself exposed to all these different types. You're going to feel drawn to one more than the others, and then just ride that out until it doesn't feel good anymore, and then try another one. And then I love that you point out props, because when I came into the yoga practice, I kind of had that stigma that props were like, you know, for the people that didn't know what they were doing and like were beginners. But what I've discovered and what you're talking about here is they're actually like, they're very intelligent, and they bring you very much deeper into the practice, and they're kind of, I look at them as like having a personal assistant adjusting your body through every single posture. Whereas like if you go to a big class, you know, that teacher can't come to you in every single pose and adjust you. But these props, when you're setting them up correctly in these different practices, which you can find online, like she said, they do that for you. And then it's permission to just be there. Like you're not having to really do much. You're just having to let go almost. And it's just, oh, it is. Yeah. I think I get the most emotional release from those, and they scare me. They terrify me because you're so vulnerable and you're so wide open, and you're going into places, like you said, that you wouldn't be able to go on your own. So it's like uncharted territory, but they scare me so much that I love them. Like I'm all about them. And it's just, it's every time I get out of one of those classes, I'm like, holy crap, I am a new woman. Like I am, oh, I feel light. I feel like, yes, emotional, and like I have a hangover from all the emotions that just came out. But like, yeah, so don't like discredit something in the yoga practice until you've tried it, because you may like start thinking like, oh, props are for beginners. Like for me, it may be different for you. Maybe you're like, that version of yoga is only for people that have done this a long time. It's like, no, every single yoga practice is open to everyone. It's inclusive of everyone and everybody. Yeah.
the work is crazy. I had that too. I mean, I used them back like when I first started practicing with Patty and Anusara, and then when I moved to Grand Forks and started practicing more of a vinyasa class, I was kind of like, well, like I kind of had that stigma too of like, I don't need a prop, like my hand can be on the floor. And a lot of times it can be, but sometimes I'm like, it can't be today. And then sometimes I'm totally just like the prop work, some of the hardest classes and like workshop style classes I've ever done, like 2 3 hour workshop classes have had props, and like a lot of them,
Mhm.
almost every pose you do. And they can like, for restorative, you just feel so open and they're supporting you. And then if you're doing like a harder, like if you're trying to get into an arm balance, they're like helping you open different parts of your body that you can't get into. And so I say, if you have props, practice with them, just try with them. Especially since sometimes our bodies that day maybe can't do what we think that we want to do, but the prop work can definitely help and get you there. And I have a chair. I got a chair a while ago, and I've been loving my yoga chair. And so even that, like, just like I have a really awesome quad stretch I do on there, and I've never felt my quads open like that before. Like,
Yeah. So what would be some of the other props that you would mention? So you have a chair. What are the other ones that you use a lot?
I use a bolster a lot more for restorative type classes. Sometimes like I'll do like a Dhanurasana or a cobra or a bow pose on the bolster too, just to like feel that lift of like where the end game is. Like I can't get there if I don't have the bolster, but like that's where I could get, like you
Mhm.
have the bolster underneath me. I use blocks a lot. Like low lunge Anjaneyasana, I use blocks a lot under my front foot to get my hip a little bit higher. And then I feel like I get more length through like my front psoas and my hip flexor and my quad. I use a strap a lot too. That's probably the one. Blocks and straps are probably the ones I practice with like daily most, just because they're the most portable and like the easiest to have around. But I'd use a strap a lot for like Supta Padangusthasana, like leg stretches, hamstring stretches. I use it a lot for like side body stretches up over my head, just to like, if you put it on like your bra line and bring it up and over, it helps get that, like you're pulling your chest up. I use that a lot for those. The blocks I use for all sorts of different things. Even if it's just like my hand on it in Trikonasana triangle pose, if it's that, or sometimes I in revolved triangle pose, put it between your inner thighs to get that squeeziness, or even chair pose, put it between your inner thighs, or if you're doing some sort of flow, put it between your inner thighs to get that. So there's really, I mean, you can make it as difficult or easy as you want. Like sometimes they're there to just like support your hand, and then sometimes they're there to be like, no, I'm going to show you like what you should be engaging. I use a lot of work like if I'm going to do back bends in my upper thoracic spine, I do a lot of bending over the block because it kind of forces your back to bend. So I use it for all different sorts of things, or like bakasana. If you feel like you can't get off the ground, put your feet on a block and you're off the ground. I mean, it's crazy, just like, and then just like play with that. Cause like, then you don't feel like you're off the ground. But like when I first started doing that pose, I was so scared. I was like, I'm going to catapult forward and break my nose. And I did not want to do that. So I had my feet on the ground and a blanket in front of me. I use blankets a lot too, to sit on and different things like that. So just play with them. That's like the thing you can do is play with them, because they feel different for everybody, and everybody needs more or less props, and some people don't like them at all. So you just kind of got to play with what you feel, and there's so much out there online, and I've learned a lot. I have my teachers, luckily, love using props, and so I've learned so much from them. But I would say I incorporate a lot of props into my practice daily.
Yeah, and I love props as well, and I've really now started to understand them as one, first and foremost, keeping me safe, because if you try to go somewhere where your body can't, you're just hurting yourself. And there is like this stigma out there. I don't know if stigma is the right word, or this like kind of mantra out there that it's like you got to get to that hardest pose as fast as you can. And that might come from just like fitness culture and other, fitness arenas, as far as like bodybuilding and like weightlifting and all that stuff, where we bring that into yoga. Whereas yoga, you're trying to keep yourself as safe and as in alignment as you can, and in touch with your body. So you're only going places where your body feels comfortable going. Yes, you find that edge, right? You find that like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but it's not painful. And I feel like props allow you to get to that edge in a really safe way, where you can explore those new territories. And like you said, maybe some postures, it's allowing you to see what it would be like, so that you can kind of free your mind of the tension and say, okay, I can try to work to go there. Now that I know what it feels like to be there in a safe, held environment. For example, she's talking about an inversion, a crow pose, where your feet are off the ground. That's a beautiful example, because yeah, sometimes for people just getting their feet off the ground or inverting for the first time, it's terrifying. But once you do it in a safe place like that, then all of a sudden your mind kind of releases that tension. It's like, okay, we could try this. Like we could go a little bit further with this. So yeah, I love that. And then just like she said, there's so much out there, but I would also say, don't think you need like the latest and greatest, most expensive mat, block, bolster, blanket. Like anything works. Like I've seen people use books as a block. I've seen, there's so many different, you can use a blanket as a strap. You can, so, and on Amazon nowadays, you can get things for really cheap. Like I got a block for like, I want to say $10, and it's my favorite. And the one that I spent money on, I'm like, I hate you. You're not working for me. So yeah.
Even like, I mean, a lot of times I have a bolster here, but if I'm like visiting someone, or I'm somewhere where like I don't want to bring all my props, like I have a travel mat that I keep in my car and it folds up. Um, but if I'm somewhere, I like take a couple pillows and then like wrap them in a blanket, and that's my bolster.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or like a water. I mean, like you could use your water bottle as a block for your hand on it if that's what you're going for. And obviously, like don't try to do too much with the water bottle, but
Keep
I mean,
yourself safe.
anything work. And I also love practicing with people too. And I think Matt has gotten to like know my practice pretty well, because sometimes I'm like come like pull my leg this way. And I'm not like saying pull my leg, but I'm like, can you just put my hand here? So like I know what way my body part should be going, or like different things like that. I think like partner poses are really big. I really love doing them. And so just so you like there's an awesome down dog with a strap and a partner pose that just like you wrap the strap around your low back through your inner thighs and it like pulls your inner thighs in back and apart just to like know like, oh, when I'm in a down dog in a class by myself, that's what I want it to feel like. And it's not going to feel the same because you don't have that person there, but having that like feeling already in your body, it makes it easier to recreate later on. And so don't be afraid to use them. Use whatever you have. Like a wall, the wall is a prop. 100% the prop for me. Like I don't do a lot of inversions without the wall, like maybe a headstand, but a lot of other things I like to have a wall because I like the security there, especially like you said, going upside down the first few times is terrifying. I have a girlfriend who has gotten really into practice probably like the last year and a half. She's so funny. And she's been going to, in Grafton, they do inversions on Thursday mornings. And she's been going and she's like, it was so terrifying. And I'm just like, you need to like use the wall. Like the wall is a prop. And so don't be afraid to like you said, it's like, I don't know if stigma is the right word either, but like this idea that like you're not supposed to use props or walls or different things like that, I think it's huge because like really at the end of the day, you just need to feel safe and you need to make sure you're keeping your body safe. But yoga is just as much of a mental game as it is a physical game. So
Yeah. So just going off of that, what are some ways that you explore the other limbs of yoga, and like what maybe like journals or prompts or whatever you use to go deeper into that like mental part of yoga?
have my little journal here. I was writing in it before, but I have notebooks like this. I keep them everywhere. This one I keep in my purse, and I just like write down things all the time. I journal a lot. Sometimes I just journal and I just write, and sometimes I take prompts from books I'm reading or podcasts or different things like that that I've listened to. A lot of teachers. There's a ton of podcasts and books out there that'll have like sections of journal prompts. Um, so I do those. Like I said, I'm not a good meditator. Like I don't like when I sit, my body just like my teacher Manorma, she's a meditation and Sanskrit teacher. She always says sit upright, not uptight. And I'm a very like uptight sitter. Yeah, I'm just like, oh my gosh, Ken, meditating, don't move. And so for me, sometimes just like I'll put my AirPods in and I'll listen to something or I won't, but I'll go on a walk with my dog and I'll be like, she heard walk and she sat up again. But I'll walk with Cora and I just like that's my meditation. Or like even when I'm unloading the dishwasher. I chant a lot. And so usually in the privacy of my own home, but I do a ton of chanting. I have a playlist on my Spotify. It's called Meditation. And so anyone can go onto my Spotify. I think it's Cassie Thompson and grab that. And I chant those a ton. And then once you kind of learn them, now I don't play it as often. And I just like, I'll chant one cooking dinner or like randomly in bed, I'll start chanting. And for me, chanting is a very high vibrational sound. And so when I'm chanting, I'm kind of bringing that vibration of my space around me up. And so that is something that I really love to do. And I got that from my teachers as well. But all the other limbs of yoga, I think you just have to study them and slowly, I mean, there's 8, right? And it's like I said, I'm not an enlightened being. Like I will probably never be an enlightened being. Like I'm very honest about that. Like I like, this is funny, but I was sharing a YouTube video that one of my teachers, Christina Sell, had, and it was like she had shared it and someone had recorded it and gave it to her. And I was watching it and she was like saying that like she doesn't come to the practice for bliss and like she doesn't leave bliss. Like she's like, I'm a pissed offaholic. Like I wake up most days like mad and pissed off. And, like I would say I'm like that. Like I am a very nice person. Compassion is contagious, but there's a lot of days where I'm like, seriously, we're doing it. I just slowly like I come to the practice and I practice or like I sit with myself and like why am I feeling like that? Like do I need to shift my shapes to shift my state? Like is that going to help? Or I like journal about it or sometimes I'm just like thinking about it or talking it out with like whoever it is and just being like Like I'll call Patty or call my mom or call Matt or whoever and just be like, hey, I have these feelings, like, why? Like, and just being with your feelings is huge. And so, and then slowly as your day goes on, like Christina said, she's like, then you start to realize, like, oh, it's not that bad. Like, I don't really have any reason to be mad, but like, I'm definitely not enlightened, and I'm not going to walk around saying and thinking that I'm like this all encompassing spiritual being. But like, I like the practice. It makes me feel good. It makes my mind feel good. And so just going with that kind of is huge too, just to know like the reason why you're practicing. And sometimes I get out of the practice and I'm like, that felt like crap. Like, but I know it did something for me. And the power is, like we said, in just showing up. Like that's where the practice in lies, is just showing up. And even if it feels like you didn't get anything, I promise you did get something out of it. Whether or not you realize it now, like it's all these small steps, and you're doing like, you can be doing the same practice and it's like a subtle practice. You could do it for a year and not feel anything, and then one day it clicks and you're like, there it is. Like that's why I've been practicing, and that's why I'm showing up. And that's where it lies for me too. And life ebbs and flows, and my life has changed a lot in the last 6 months, like a lot. And so there were times when I was like feeling really high, and there's times when I'm feeling really low, but like the practice is always a steady for me. And it's there no matter if I'm feeling low or feeling high, and I just show up. And then sometimes I'm like, that's it. That's why I've been practicing, and it's feeling mundane and I'm just going through the motions. And then the next day I step on my mat and I'm like, shit, holy shit. That's why I practice. Like I feel it. And so just knowing that it doesn't always have to feel blissful is huge for me. Because I spent a really good chunk of time thinking that that's how the practice needed to feel. And I think all yogis tend to go through that, especially when you just start out. Like it does, like that's how you feel. Like when you just start a yoga practice, you're like, you want to be there all the time. I remember I was taking like multiple classes a day, and I was like, I was doing everything I could to like be in a yoga room. And then it felt so good. And then at some point I was like, I don't feel that good anymore, but I needed to like work through that. And so just knowing that it's not always going to feel like that either.
Yeah, letting go of that idea of perfection or that it should look a certain way gives you permission to actually just show up. And I love that you mentioned like doing it in just your daily life. So that was one of the best tips I was ever given, was like those mundane things that you do every single day. If you bring presence to them, that is meditation. Like driving your car, sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, brushing your teeth, making your bed, the things that you do every single day. If you're not bringing presence to them, you're just subconsciously going through the motions. So why not use this as an opportunity to like get clarity in your mind and just kind of get like really into the moment, feel the bedding as you're pulling it up, place the pillows where it feels good. Like it sounds like, all like voodoo, but it's like, no, it actually makes a huge difference, like a huge difference. And it's its own form of meditation.
And cooking, like my
Mm-hmm.
mom is a really good cook, and she caters on the side. And so like through that, I have like grown to really love cooking. And especially this time of year, I'm making dinner most nights a week for Matt and the whole farm crew. And I felt like for a long time I was just like throwing stuff in, get it done as fast as I can. And now it's like even just like cutting up veggies, it's like so like peaceful to me. And it's like it's such a task. Like I could do it with my eyes closed, and a lot of things, right? Like that you just do every day. You could do like that, but just using that practice to be like making it more mindful.
Mm-hmm.
So, and especially like with cooking, I feel like it's really important too, because like you're putting all this love and energy into cooking this meal that's going to in return nourish you. And so I use that as a huge part of it too. And not to say that I'm like perfect at that, because there's a lot of days where I'm like, here's a sandwich and go, right? Like you're like, oh, what are we eating? We're just going to grab something quick, right? So, but it just like knowing why you're doing things. And another thing is like anything that you do with like bringing attention to anything is doing yoga. So like you don't like, that's another thing is like people are always like, well, I don't practice yoga. It's like my teacher, Manorma, she's a Sanskrit teacher. She has a website, it's called Luminous Studies, and she doesn't practice really the physical asana. She had an injury and she doesn't like, that's not like, she doesn't that, you know, that, but she is like the most mindful, meditative, like Sanskrit teacher. I like learned so much for her. And if you follow her on Instagram, she does like a ton of like lives or stories. And then she'll do, especially right now, but I've taken her module 1 Sanskrit class and I was like blown away because that was like a whole nother side of yoga. And like, I know Sanskrit, I try to learn it. But before I took her class, I was like, I didn't know that there's like certain mouth positions for certain Sanskrit letters, or like even like the dashes or the dots above or below them. I was just like, I mean, I knew they meant something, but I didn't care. And then I took this class with her in May and I was like, oh, like that's the other part. Like that's another part that I have to like dive into and study. And so that I've been doing that a lot too. And just like the pronunciation of it is huge too. But I learned so much from her and I was sitting the whole time like I am now. And so there's so many types of yoga that you can practice. Like when my shoulder was hurt, you saw me for like 4 months. I wasn't practicing. I was teaching in a sling and I was like stretching my hamstrings, but like I didn't do a down dog for like almost 5 months. But like I still felt like I was in the practice and it was almost harder than when I was actually doing the physical practice because I was like having to spend time with myself. And that was way harder than like doing a down dog or a handstand or a bakasana or whatever pose I was doing. Being with myself, hard.
Yeah, and I love that thought of, you know, yoga, yes, it may start for you in the studio, but it's really like you should be practicing. You shouldn't, I'm not gonna tell you what you should do, but if you want to be in the yoga practice all day, you can be practicing yoga every single day. Like she said, all you have to do is bring attention to what you're doing. And then I also love that a while ago you mentioned, I have to share a story because it was just like my aha moment. I was in a deep place, I was in a dark place, I wasn't feeling very good. I found yoga. I loved the physical aspect of it. But then like I said, I got burnt out of that, like giving me something from the physical practice. And so then I was like, well, is this even doing anything? And so I was just kept on going to yoga because it was something I could do and I didn't really have a lot on my plate at the time. So I just kept on going. And then one time I was sitting in traffic. And usually, like, I'm not, like, before I started yoga, I was so, like, unaware of my thought patterns and what was going on in my mind and how I was reacting to things. But before, I would have been like, oh my gosh, this traffic. And I would have started this story in my head, right? And I would have believed it and I would have ran with it. But in this moment, I'm sitting in Minneapolis traffic. If you've ever been in it, it sucks. But I was sitting there by myself, and all of a sudden, all those normal thoughts came in. You know, this sucks. She just cut me off. This is going to be so slow. When am I going to get home? You know, just normal thoughts. But then I laughed. Like, I literally started laughing out loud because I was like, oh my gosh, why, like, this story isn't helping me. Like, this story, like, why am I not just accepting the fact that I am sitting in traffic? Like, this story is just making me miserable. Like, I can just listen to music, listen to a podcast, be with myself. I could just enjoy this because this is what is, and just accept it and not have this mental dialogue about it. And then I was like, the yoga's working. I was like, oh, this is what it's all about, you know? And like, no, my body probably looked the same that it did, like, you know, a while ago, but like my mind was just like, it was so cool to see the yoga practice show up in my real life. And like, that's why don't set an expectation on how your body's going to look or how your mind's going to change at this time. And I should be here. Like, let go of all of that. It's gonna come. Like, if you show up, it's gonna meet you there. And it's so cool when it does. Like, it's like,
Yeah. My
yes.
sister Sam said one time, she said, going on with your, like, with the traffic story, is she was like, you're not responsible for your first thought. That's just natural. That's human nature, especially in the like times we're living in now, but you are responsible for your second thought. And so lately I've been thinking a lot about that and being like, when something sets me off, just being like, why? Like, does this have to do with them or me? Because 9 times out of 10, it's me. So feeling that, and then just also, I've always said is like the true magic of yoga is not what happens on your mat. Like, don't get me wrong, it feels flippin' awesome to like get a new pose or like feel the pose like you've never felt it before. But like feels almost better when you're sitting in traffic and normally you'd be like, so crabby. And you're just like, I'm going to take time and enjoy it. And I think part of that comes with like the culture we live in today is like everything's like from here to there. And I know like I used to run 180 miles an hour. I was like to work, to home, to walking the dog, to seeing Matt, to like making dinner, to cleaning, to cooking, to like, it was a whole thing. And it was just like, that's what I did. And not that I don't do that now, but I wasn't enjoying any of it. Like I really didn't. Like there was like a time, and not that like that'll come around again. Like there'll be another time in my life where I'd be like, I'm not fine enjoying anything. But just to like sit back and be in traffic and just to laugh about it and be like, I'm just going to enjoy where I'm at, and I'm going to play like my favorite tunes, or I'm going to listen to Noelle's podcast, and I'm just going to like be. It's huge. And just recognizing that's like the first step, is just to recognize that in yourself, right? And not, when it comes back around, to not be frustrated.
There's this whole new quality of life that you just touched on. So like she could have, you know, all those things she just listed, she could keep that same schedule and bring this whole other quality to it by just being present with it. All of a sudden the joy is back. Yes, maybe you need to change a few things to have space for that joy, and like then you're letting go of things. That's fine too. But like that's what I would just like, that's majority of our culture, right? It's just running from one thing to the next. And like, I'm not like, yes, you need some of that to be healthy and operate in this world, in this materialistic world that we're in. Part of that is accepting that, but you don't have to give up that peace and that presence underneath it all. Like you can still feel that deep joy. It's crazy. You know, and like you said, I wanted to touch on one more thing. You said 9 times out of 10, you know, we're just grabbing onto that first thought and forgetting that, you know, like I said, that was so overwhelming to me. I'm like, okay, so I'm not my thoughts, but I also can think thoughts. And, you know, like they were just, it was such an abstract thing to me. And I'm like, okay, I love that you touched on that. Like a lot of our thoughts are just energy expressing themselves. It's just your body releasing energy, and you're not responsible for them. And the more you can let go of them, responsible is not the right word. You are responsible for how you react to them, and how that second thought is kind of like your reaction to it. You're not responsible for the original thought. That's just your body releasing energy. You've picked up things from other conversations, from shows you've watched, from social media, from how you were raised, from your culture. Like those are the thoughts that are just subconsciously coming out, and then creating that space, which yoga allows us to do, between the reaction to them. Okay, how do I feel about this? What is my thought about this? That's conscious. That's a choice you can make. And that's, I think, real yoga. Like that's life-changing.
Yes. Wow. That's a whole nother dive.
I know. Let's go for another hour. Okay.
Yeah. I'll talk about sometimes, but the consciousness, like,
yes.
that is, like, you sit and you like, your first thought is like, obviously, like, I can't stop that. Like, that's just like you said, like, you pick up stuff and that's just like, you're thinking all day long. But your second thought, and it's even past the second thought, into like the stories that you weave. Because I'm the same way as you. It's just like, I start to weave this story and I go down this rabbit hole, and I'm just like, get out of it. Like, just be in the moment and just like trying to like let it go and let it pass you by. And that's where I think the restorative practice has really come into play for me. Because sometimes when you're in like a yoga hour or a vinyasa or a faster based class, you don't have time. You don't have time to think about it. But with restorative class, you have the time, and you're forced to kind of spend the time, unless you're really good at blocking it out, which I am sometimes. But you're forced to like, you're like, I'm here, I'm going to do it. I'm going to spend that time with myself. And that's huge. But it also
really, yeah, that is the real hard work. It's just being with yourself. I mean, like I would say 9 out of 10 people are doing everything that they're doing in their life to run away from themselves, and, you know, trying to fulfill this need that only being with themselves could fill. So obviously we could talk for 17 hours, as you can tell. So I'm going to just go into the last question. So it's kind of a loaded question. You can answer it however you'd like. But I just love to ask it. So what is your definition of a well-lived life? And what I mean by that is, like, if you looked back on your life, what would you want other people to remember you by? Or like, what would be, like, if you took everything that you did on this planet and it had to go with you, what would the tips that you would want to leave, or like the feeling, or the, you know what I mean? Like the mantra or whatever you want to leave behind, what would that be?
So I did a lot of work around this, and I continue to do a lot of work around it because I think it can change like as life changes. And obviously, you know that like you're gonna be a mama soon, and I feel like that shifts everything. Um, and so I did a lot of work around like what's my dharma, so, like what upholds me, like what was my path, what is my path, and one of my friends who she was doing a lot of work around it too in our last training, she's a nurse and she's like my dharma, right? And I think for me, I am very how do I describe it? I'm very loyal, but I am very like mothery. And so already, I don't have I have a dog, and she's like my life. But I think that's part of it. Is just serving. I think serving, whether I'm like serving my family, whether I'm serving my friends, my community. Like I said in the beginning, is like when I opened the studio, it wasn't so much as for me, it was to serve the community and give them a place. And so that's kind of how, and it was how I was raised by my parents. Like my house was always like the sanctuary and the place that all the kids were. And so going forward, like that is what I want to have, but not like even in that aspect, but just like my friends, like I always am like, I want to be a safe space for people, whether it's like the physical space that like my home that I'm sitting in right now, or whether it's just like me being a safe space for them to come to. That's kind of like what, and that changes, right? Like lately I've been into being like super compassionate. Like I'm using this phrase, like compassion is contagious. Um, and that's so true. So I think it's just like your dharma is kind of like wherever you are at that moment in your life. And I know that like someday when I'm in like the next phase of my life or having kids or like past that, like I look at like some of my friends who are having kids of their own and then like their parents, like that changes, or like, and I think being a teacher is another huge part of it. And being a teacher, not just to be a teacher, but being a teacher to like share, which then in return is serving people, and just getting the yoga practice out there, whether it's like the physical practice of it or whether it's just someone listening to this podcast, whether they're driving to work one day listening to us talk about all the fun things of yoga that are like most of the time we're like, we're not enlightened, it's really hard, but telling that, like speaking your truth about it is huge. um so that's kind of where I am right now. Like I just want to serve people, and how I do that will obviously change throughout the years. And lately, like I've had um a slight breakdown the other day, which I'm going to be very open and honest. Like I definitely break down, and I was saying how lately I've felt like worthless. And it's really true. Like I've had a couple weeks off of work. I'm transitioning into a new job and a new role, which I'm very excited about. But having 2 weeks off, like I don't remember the last time I had 2 weeks off with really nothing to do. I don't have the studio to run anymore. I'm not working right now till next week. So I had last weekend, this week off, and I just felt, I was like, it wasn't a sense of boredom. It was a sense of like, I'm not contributing. And that really hit me. And I know for myself, that's not how I should feel at all. Like Matt was like, no, don't feel like that. Like don't. Cause he's like, you're cooking food all the time. And I am definitely contributing to the world right now, but I didn't feel like I was because I wasn't teaching or because I wasn't sitting at my desk working. So having like, knowing the discernment between the two is like, but also I know I needed a reset. Like I needed to take some time to just like be with myself and like do my own thing. So I just, knowing the difference between the two has been huge. But the serving thing is huge for me because I do get that sense of like worthlessness, and I fall into that hole, and I struggle with anxiety and depression. Like I am 100% open about that. Like that is where like my struggles are. but I know that I get my energy from people, and I get my energy from like being in a studio full of people and teaching with people. So when I don't have that feeling like I'm helping or serving people, it comes back on me. But that's something that I need to work through too. And so the Dharma question is just, it's so full, because you could ask me, we could do this again next month. And next month I might be like, it might be a totally different answer. I don't know. And so right now too, and I feel like we're both at an age where like our lives are shifting massively. Like, you're about to be a boy mom. And like, I like in the last 6 months, like I got a new job, I got engaged, I closed a yoga studio. Like, that's a lot. Like, that is so much. And like, just like that has shifted like how I look at everything massively. And so just being okay with that too. And like for a long time I was so psyched out. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's changing, like I don't like it. But just being able to like ride the wave of the change and just be like, on the other end of this, I'm going to be okay. Like, I don't know what it's going to look like. Like, I don't know what my life is going to look like when I come out of all this stuff, and when like the COVID pandemic ends, and like when life maybe goes back to normal, and it might never go back to normal. Like, what is the new normal? But I know that I'll be okay, even when sometimes I feel worthless. And so getting to that place of like, what do I need to do for myself to not feel that way, is I need to serve people. And whether that's like serving them food, or like I had a friend over this morning and we practiced and we had coffee, and I instantly felt better. And so just serving is my, like, it might sound so mundane and people are like, what are you serving? And it's like, whatever that is that someone needs. But at the same point, I know that when I'm serving them, like I'm getting just as much from them. Like, holding space for one another is so big in my world. Like, even though I haven't like seen you and practiced with you for a while, like every time I see your stuff of you practicing, like we have practiced enough together over the years that I'm like, I'm holding space for Noelle right now. And I know that she's holding space for me, whether you're like consciously thinking it or not. Like, your energies are just so in tune with one another that that is like where I lie. So that's what I got. I
I
mean,
love that. That's amazing. So what I'm hearing is like you are serving in a way that feels authentic to you in that season, which is so beautiful, because like you said, we're always changing. Our life's always changing. Our circumstances are always changing. But then I also love that you pointed out that, you know, when you stopped doing a bunch of things on the external world, you know, how do you still feel about yourself? Are you still down with yourself? And that's such a beautiful smack in the face, because I've also felt that when I stopped producing, you know, I took a little break from, or a step back from something, it's like, oh, maybe I was, you know, replacing that or trying to make that my worthiness, when really that's up to me. And so I think that's such a beautiful lesson, but that's also like such a hard one, because like, you know, there is a good balance, right? I'm also an extrovert, so I love to get energy from other people, but there's that piece of energy that I can only get from myself. And sometimes I'm neglecting that when I am running so fast. And so I love that you point that out too.
it's so easy to forget about. You don't even realize that you are. And just knowing that, like, that has been huge for me. And I was even, I don't remember who I was telling this to, but I was saying that like every 5 years, I'm going to take like a 6-month break from teaching. And it's going to be hard and I'm going to hate it. But I have realized through the 6-month break I've had right now that that's what I need. Like, it was awful. Like, and I am like, I dabbled in it and I was like teaching one night a week outside and different things like that. Um, but for a few months, I really didn't teach at all. And so, as much as I was like, I miss teaching, like for me, I got to practice more. Um, I got to have more time just to spend with myself and my family and do the things that I wanted to do too. But it was a reset. As hard as it was to miss my people and to get that energy, I had to learn how like I could give my prana back to me. And then energy is prana, and prana, your prana is so precious. Like, we don't have endless amounts of energy. And I think like nowadays our culture kind of teaches us that we do, or like there's all these things to get more energy. And I am like of the thing where it's like, I have to spend my energy wisely. And you totally do, because you don't get an endless amount of energy. And someday, like, you're going to run out of it.
Yeah, it's like that cost benefit. Like we do that with other people. Like we're like, okay, if I go to this lunch or if I work this amount of hours, then I don't have those hours to give to my family. But when it comes to ourselves, that's up to us. Like, we don't have a boss saying you have to give yourself 5 hours a day. That's up to us. So it's, I think, a lot easier for us to neglect and be the first thing that we give up, because we're the only ones that are holding ourselves accountable to it. And so I love that you talk about, we don't have endless amounts of energy, and that is the underlying tone of our society, is like, give, 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 give. You have all the energy in the world. If you don't have energy, something's wrong with you. And it's like, no, the most amazing, intelligent, impactful human beings that I've ever met are ones that honor themselves and set boundaries around their time and their energy, and say, no, that's too much for me. I would love to do that maybe sometime in the future, but right now I have to honor me. And the more you honor yourself, then you're able to serve from an authentic place, which I see you doing all the time, which is so
Yeah.
amazing.
Said it perfectly. That's it. The more you honor yourself, the more that you are able to serve whatever your dharma is. Like, my dharma is just like serving people in the teachings, and serving my friends and family, and showing up for people is really big for me. Um, but whatever that is for you, you have to be so authentic in it and realize, like, your energy, like saying no. Like, I had a whole come to Jesus with the word saying no. Like, I never said the word no, ever. It was like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And I was so burnt out. I had a breakdown. I was like, literally, like, my eyes were bloodshot. And it was at a time in my life that was super stressful too. But I needed to learn how to say the word no, and not in the word that was like, no, I don't want to help you. Like, that's not how I wanted to come off and at all. It was like, no, I can't do that, because I know doing that, I won't be able to serve my community if I do that. And so just, you have to play within those limits too. And then sometimes you say yes to something and you do it, and then you're like, I don't think I'd do that again. And so you just, I mean, it's a game, like, it's an ebb and flow of it, but just learning where your limits are and your capacity is. And obviously, if you said this before, like, sometimes you have to be in that place that's uncomfortable. Like, if you're never in that place that's uncomfortable, like, mentally, professionally, in relationships, you're never going to grow. But also, if you hang out in that place that's uncomfortable for too long, you're going to flip the switch and run the other way. So it's like finding that balance of being like uncomfortable, comfortable, uncomfortable, comfortable. So you can, like, it's a game. Like, we're in this like game of life, like literally everything around us. And so we're just like playing in it, and we're just flowing in it. And sometimes it's like super stressful, and sometimes you're like, maybe I'll be enlightened someday. But yeah.
I love that you bring up the word no, because I'm going to do a podcast on this actually, like, really soon, because it's something that it's not celebrated in society to say no. Everyone wants you to say yes, obviously for good, like, I feel like they're doing it in a good way, like from good intentions. But that's another note I'd love to add to this, is that don't wait for the world to set boundaries for you. Like, don't, like, I went really into it like you did, and I got burnt out, and I was kind of like resenting the world. I'm like, well, they should know that I don't have time, like, they should know that my schedule is full. And then I was like, what? Well, you say yes to everything. Like, how would they possibly know? It's not up for anyone else to say no other than you. So, girl, like, put your hands back on the steering wheel and take responsibility for the fact that you've said yes up until now. All of this is on your plate because you said yes. So now it's time to start to elaborate on those boundaries and, like, really start to get rooted in what you can handle and what you can't. And yeah, finding that sweet spot of growth, not, being always comfortable, but not pushing yourself too far where you're like not making any progress, like kind of just going in a circle. So yeah.
I push myself too far into something, I run away from it. And I like, this is not work. Like, my white flag is up, I'm done. But if I like ease myself into things, it helps. And no is not a bad word. And like I said, it's like, it's really hard because you want to make it clear that you're not saying no for like the wrong reasons, but you're saying no because it's like, not because I don't want to help you, because it's not going to serve me. And knowing that, like, you're in that cycle of it. And that's hard because, like, you're a giver, I'm a giver. Like, most people are givers. And obviously there are people who are takers too. So you're like in that, like, like you said, girl, put your hands back on the steering wheel. That is such a good line. Like, put your hands on the steering wheel of your life and say no.
Yeah.
And say yes to what you want to say yes to. And no doesn't mean like no forever. It just might be like, no, not right now. Like,
But
check
then
that.
the yeses are so much that much more sweet because you get to be fully there. You're not like spread so thin that when you do get to say yes, all of you is there. You're all in it and it's just so good. So I literally think we could talk for like 2 hours, but I want to let you get back to your life. Respect your boundaries. So thank you so much for being here. Is there anything like last things that you want to say before we leave? No, you're all
No, to all
okay.
the listeners, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll link your Instagram and, get everyone in touch with you. But thank you so much for spending your time with us.
yeah, of course. Thank you guys. I'm so glad this was so fun. I hope to see you on Instagram. Sometimes I post some wise things on there and sometimes I don't. So just come follow me. But yes, I'm excited to hear your no podcast. Like, now I'm going to be like waiting by my phone for your no podcast to come out because you need reminders on it. And I know I need a reminder on it too. So thank you for having me. This was so fun.